This is a critical moment for our future, and we must act decisively to address the challenges ahead.
David Russell is guilty of all charges. David Russell is guilty of all charges.
Executed. David Hosier died by lethal injection. He was convicted of killing Angela Gilpin and her husband Rodney in Jefferson City in 2009. Governor Mike Parson denied his final request for clemency last night.
The first sound wasn't screaming. It was the siren, sharp, relentless, cutting through the night like a blade. Red and blue lights washed over the house in violent pulses, illuminating curtains that would never be opened again, walls that would never hear another argument or apology. Inside that house, two bodies lay still, Angela Gilpin and her husband, once alive, once ordinary, now reduced to evidence. This was not passion, this was aftermath. And somewhere, not yet in handcuffs but already condemned, David Russell Hosier stood on the edge of a truth he had spent years refusing to face. Every story like this pretends the ending came out of nowhere. It didn't. It always begins long before the crime scene tape goes up. It begins with a fracture so small it feels harmless at first. David Russell Hosier was not raised in chaos. He was raised in quiet disappointment. As a boy, he learned early how to read rooms, how to sense when he was tolerated rather than wanted. Family dinners were polite but distant. Praise was rare. Affection came with conditions. He learned not to ask for too much, because asking invited rejection. So he adapted. He became agreeable. He became attentive. He learned that love, if it came at all, had to be earned through effort and loyalty. And even then, it could disappear without warning. That belief followed him into adulthood like a shadow. David wanted what everyone wants, to matter to someone, to be chosen without hesitation, to be the reason someone stayed. But the harder he tried to secure that feeling, the more elusive it became. Relationships came and went. Each ending reinforced the same lesson: people leave. By the time Angela Gilpin entered his life, David was already exhausted from loneliness. She didn't sweep in dramatically. She arrived slowly, casually, a conversation that lingered longer than expected, a laugh that felt genuine. She asked questions. She listened. She remembered details no one else ever had. With Angela, David felt visible. She was warm where his life felt cold, decisive where he felt unsure, confident where he felt invisible. And when she spoke about her life, there was always an undertone of dissatisfaction. "My marriage isn't what it looks like," she said once, quietly. "He doesn't really see me." Those words settled into David's chest and stayed there. Angela was married. That fact hovered between them from the beginning, uncomfortable but ignored. At first, David told himself it was harmless. Then he told himself it was temporary. Eventually, he told himself it was fate. Their relationship moved underground. Late-night phone calls, messages deleted seconds after being sent, meetings that existed only in fragments of memory. The secrecy intensified everything. It made the connection feel urgent, forbidden, irreplaceable. Angela painted herself as trapped. David painted himself as her escape. Each time she returned home to her husband, David felt something inside him tighten. Jealousy mixed with resentment. Love slowly curdled into entitlement. "He doesn't deserve you," David said once, his voice low. "I do." And Angela didn't correct him. Over time, David's internal world narrowed. Everything became about her happiness, her freedom, her promise that someday things would be different. But someday kept moving. The husband became less human in David's mind, not a man with a life, but an obstacle, a delay, a mistake that needed correcting. David convinced himself he was fighting for love. That narrative protected him from the truth that he was losing control. The night of the murders did not feel dramatic to David at first. It felt like the end of waiting. When police arrived, the house was unnaturally quiet. No chaos, no struggle left to witness, only the sterile stillness of lives already taken. Investigators moved with practiced restraint. They knew what death looked like. They knew how to read a room that had given up its secrets too late. David's phone would later tell the story he tried to soften. Messages recovered, timelines reconstructed, words once whispered in intimacy, now spoken aloud in rooms filled with strangers. Every "I can't live without you," every "we'll be together soon," every rationalization frozen in digital permanence. In the interrogation room, time slowed to a crawl. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Questions came calmly, deliberately. David tried to explain without admitting, tried to frame love as confusion, desperation as devotion, but explanations collapsed under their own weight. "Did you think about what would happen afterwards?" one detective asked. David stared at the table, because afterwards had never existed in his fantasy. When the arrests became public, the fallout was immediate and merciless. News headlines stripped nuance away. Social media filled the gaps with speculation and rage. David's name was no longer his, it belonged to the crime. Family members recoiled under the weight of association. Some defended him quietly, clinging to the version of David they remembered. Others couldn't reconcile that version with the evidence now impossible to ignore. Shame seeped into every corner of their lives. In court, emotion gave way to structure. Timelines, motives, exhibits. Prosecutors reconstructed the path from affair to homicide with surgical precision. They did not raise their voices. They didn't need to. Defense attorneys tried to humanize David without excusing the inexcusable. They spoke of emotional vulnerability, of obsession, of mental unraveling. But none of it changed what had happened. Angela's life was dissected in fragments, her marriage exposed, her private struggles laid bare. She was no longer a person, she was a narrative contested by opposing sides. Her husband's absence loomed over everything, his silence louder than any testimony. In the gallery, grief sat motionless. Families listened as strangers analyzed lives they would never fully understand. Justice felt procedural, necessary, inadequate. When the verdict came, guilty, it landed without drama. No gasps, no celebration, only a collective understanding that something permanent had been acknowledged. Sentencing closed the door on David's former life. Prison stripped away the last illusion. There were no romantic narratives left to cling to, no one calling him special, no future imagined beyond concrete walls and routine. Time became his harshest companion. Years passed slowly. Reflection replaced denial. David began to confront what he had avoided his entire life, that his fear of abandonment had turned into control, that his need for validation had overridden empathy, that what he called love had been rooted in possession. Transformation did not come as forgiveness, it came as accountability. Outside those walls, families learned how to live with absence. Holidays rearranged, traditions rewritten. Children grew older without explanations that ever felt sufficient. Justice did not restore what was lost, but it drew a line. It said the truth mattered, that lives mattered. David Russell Hosier's story does not end in redemption. It ends in reckoning, with silence, with responsibility, with the understanding that some awakenings arrive only after irreparable damage. And the truth remains, heavy and unavoidable. Betrayal does not begin with murder, it begins with permission. And justice, when it finally arrives, does not erase the past, but it protects the living.